Welcome to Composition Essentials from Quickpro Camera Guides. Photography can be very rewarding, and we hope you'll enjoy learning more about it with this DVD. We trust that you'll find this information helpful and informative. As you may have noticed, taking great pictures doesn't always happen automatically. It's important to understand some fundamentals to help you capture great images. No matter what camera you're using, the fundamentals of photography stay the same. This DVD was created to teach you ways to use composition to improve your photography. Before we get started, let's talk a little bit about the composition tips card that came with your DVD. This card was designed to be a quick reference to keep in your camera bag to help you when you're out taking pictures. It will help you remember the things that we'll be discussing today. Check the back of your card for coupon codes that can be used at quickproguides.com. This DVD will guide you through several of the key elements of composition and give direction for how to make your images more visually interesting. We'll learn about the rule of thirds, altering the viewpoint, filling the frame, and using line. As the photographer, it's your job to decide where to place the subject in your photograph. The arrangement of the subjects and the background in your image is the composition. A strong composition will make your images more visually interesting, and they'll hold the viewer's attention longer. To make your photos more interesting, you not only need an interesting subject, but you need to photograph it in an interesting way. To accomplish this, we'll explore several compositional rules. These rules can be broken, but images are often stronger when the rules are followed. One of the most common and powerful rules in composition is the rule of thirds, which helps us decide where to place the subject in the frame. The rule of thirds simply states that an image should be divided into thirds horizontally and vertically, like a tic-tac-toe board. When the image is divided, there will be 4 intersections of the lines, and the subject should be placed at one of those intersections. Now, this is Lauren, and she'll be helping us as we learn more about the rule of thirds. It's natural to want to place the main subject in the center of the image. It feels almost like it belongs there. Our cameras also tend to encourage us to place everything in the center because that's often where the camera will focus and meter. However, when the subject is directly in the center, there's lots of empty space around it, and the image will feel stagnant and will not engage the viewer. Typically, snapshots often have the subject centered in the frame, so let's take a few pictures like that to help us see the difference of the rule of thirds. Since we're photographing a person, we'll want to make sure that the background is blurry, so we'll set the camera to aperture priority mode, and we'll set the aperture to the lowest number. We'll take a few pictures. When we divide the image into equal thirds horizontally and vertically, we have some guidelines to help us know where to place the focal point of the image. We should aim for the intersections of the lines, which will place the subject or the focal point slightly off of center, both horizontally and vertically, but not so far off center that the image looks out of balance. This will make the image asymmetrical and more pleasing to the eye. Although images are more visually interesting when the subject is off center, it is also important to keep the image balanced. Think of an image like a teeter-totter. On a teeter-totter, if all of the kids are on one side, it won't be much fun. Similarly, if all of the visually interesting subjects fall on one side of an image, the composition won't be very interesting. A strong composition will have horizontal and vertical balance, but the balance doesn't necessarily need to be things of equal size. For instance, if we were to place Lauren on one side of the frame, this bush will provide visual balance for the other side. A small bright area can be balanced by a larger, less intense area on the opposite side of the frame. Just like 2 kids of different sizes can make a teeter-totter work if they adjust the location of where they're seated, the 2 sides of your image don't need to be identical, just of equal visual weight. The idea of having an interesting composition is to make the viewer want to stay and look at the image for as long as possible. When the subject is placed off-center, its importance will be emphasized and the viewer's attention will be held longer. If the composition is centered, it will look like a photo that anyone can take. It will appear to the viewer to be what they expect to see. As you're composing your shot, try to surprise the viewer a little by placing the subject off-center. As the viewer contemplates the reasons for the placement of the focal point, they will start to read meaning into the image. So let's experiment using this theory, and we'll take a few pictures of Lauren using the rule of thirds. As we look at both of the photos of Lauren, we can see what a difference the rule of thirds can make. The image with Lauren centered in the frame doesn't hold the viewer's attention as long as the image with Lauren off-center. As you're deciding which intersection to place the subject or focal point in, think about which part of the subject you'd like to be the focal point. When you're taking close-up pictures of people, you'll want to keep their eyes in the top third of the frame. If you place the eyes in the middle or lower third, it will look odd to have them so low with so much space above the subject's head. Also, if the person is facing to one side, you'll generally want to give them more space toward the side they are facing. Otherwise, it will appear that they're looking out of frame and it will guide the viewer's eyes out of the frame as well. The rule of thirds also tells us where to place the horizon line in landscape photos. Generally, the horizon line should not be placed directly in the middle of the image. That will make the photo half sky and half ground, which is not visually intriguing. By placing the horizon at the top third, it will make the mountains look bigger, more majestic, and give a closed-in feel to the image. If you place the horizon on the lower third, it will give your image a more open feel. One way to learn this idea is to take several pictures of the same subject with different compositions. Let's try this experiment. We'll take several pictures of Lauren. We'll take a few pictures of her placed at each of the 4 intersections of the rule of thirds. Now we can compare these images side by side to see which third is most pleasing for the subject and scenario. Often people are drawn to images where the subject is on the right third of the image. This may not be the case every time, and it's important to trust your own eye. As you're out taking pictures, remember the compositional rules and choose the ones that you like the best. As you develop your own photographic style, you'll be able to work faster because you've already had in mind what composition you'd like for a given image. Often there will be other secondary objects in your composition that are important to help tell the story of your image. Keep the rule of thirds in mind when deciding where these secondary objects should go in your composition as well. By placing them at one of the intersections, you will help ensure that they are noticed in your composition, and they will be given consideration when the viewer is thinking about the meaning of the image. If the secondary objects are outside of the intersections, they may appear as important, and they may actually distract from the primary subject. Likewise, if they're placed directly in the center of the image, they may distract from the primary subject. The placement of these secondary objects should be given as much consideration as the main subject. They can be what is unique about your photo, and they can often be the meaning of your image. When including secondary objects in a composition, it's important that these objects help tell the message of the image. They should not look out of place or they will distract the viewer. It's very important to have an image that is unified to keep the message straight without confusing the viewer. As a photographer, it's your goal to help the viewer understand the message you're trying to send with your image. The viewer can be drawn to anything that looks different or out of place. If the secondary subject looks out of place, it will take the attention away from your intended subject. If there's something that looks out of place or distracting in your image, find a way to make it not so distracting or eliminate it altogether. When setting up your shot, it's wise to only include what's important and nothing more. Keep it as simple as possible. By eliminating distractions, you will strengthen the power and the message of your photo. Another compositional element to be aware of is negative space. Negative space is the space around the subject. The subject itself is the positive space of a composition. When you're taking pictures that include negative space, you'll want to make sure that the rule of thirds is used so the negative space doesn't distract from the main image. Today we'll be taking pictures of this old trumpet so we can place an ad for it in an online auction website. Great images can be very powerful advertising tools to make products more appealing to potential buyers. A good photo can mean the difference between making a sale or not. We want to make this trumpet look as appealing as possible by showcasing its qualities and character. Simple everyday objects can often be very interesting subjects for photographs if they're shot in intriguing ways. Camera angle can make all the difference. By choosing a camera angle that is different than the way we generally view the subject, we can show the viewer something that they may not have noticed before. Even if the object is something they are very familiar with, showing it to them in a new way will make the image interesting and unique. The difference between a snapshot and a photograph is the thought that is put into the composition and camera angle. A snapshot is simply a record of the objects that were at a certain place. It's usually a straight-on view of the front of the subject directly in the center of the image. Now let's take a few pictures of this trumpet. Anyone can take a snapshot of a product, but with a little effort and creativity, we can take a picture that will be truly interesting. A good photograph will have an interesting composition that the photographer considered before the shot was taken. The object will be placed in the most flattering location with a camera angle that shows the best view. There will be visual evidence of the photographer's hand in the creation of the image. Sometimes you simply need to change the angle of the camera. Typically, cameras are held horizontally, and that's how most images will be taken. Horizontal angles are good for landscapes or photographs of short, wide objects. Do not be afraid to try turning your camera vertically. If the subject is tall and slender, it makes more sense to take the picture vertically. We can also turn the camera on an angle for interesting diagonal images. When we tip the camera at an angle, we can add a little life to an otherwise mundane setting. You may find that diagonal lines are more interesting than straight horizontal or vertical lines. When you tip the camera at an angle, be careful not to give the impression that your subject is falling out of the frame. This can be distracting and make your composition feel awkward. Now let's take a few pictures with some different angles. Changing the position of the camera can also show a more interesting view of your subject. If you keep your camera at normal eye level, you will show a view of the subject that most people are familiar with. Try to explore the subject. Go around it. Get up high, down low, up close. Do what you can to show the details of the subject. Show what is unique about that particular item that makes it different from every other one in the world. Most of the time, an image that showcases the detail in a subject will be more visually interesting than an image of the entire subject. Don't hesitate to climb up a ladder if you need to. If you have to, get down on the ground to get an interesting camera angle. The angle of the camera can give a very distinct message to your photograph. When you lower your camera angle, the subject will seem larger. If you do this when photographing a person, it will make the person look larger, more powerful, or more intimidating. The camera represents the viewer's eye, and it will give the impression that the subject is much larger than expected. If you want to lessen this effect, you can raise the camera up to a higher angle. To make a large person look less intimidating, you can take pictures of them from a higher angle. A higher angle will make the subject appear smaller and less intimidating to the viewer. A higher angle also works well when you're taking portraits of people. When people are photographed from above, it makes them look smaller and has a slimming effect. As we're experimenting with different camera angles, we'll need to keep in mind that the angle doesn't have to be extreme to create a good effect. Raising or lowering the camera just a little can have a strong impact on how the subject is perceived. Let's take a few more pictures of this trumpet, but this time we'll try to take some pictures from above. Subjects are often photographed from a straight-on view, and a simple change in that view can dramatically improve an image. As you're taking pictures, try including a variety of side and even back views of the subject. Doing this will give the viewer a different and more interesting view of the subject. Take a few moments to explore the scene and find the best way to show this object that will send the message you want. Photographing the subject from a different perspective will also help to hide any of its flaws. When we're taking pictures of this trumpet, we'll want to make it look as good as possible. We'll want to show it in a way that we haven't seen before. Let's try taking several shots from different angles and camera positions, and we'll have more variety to choose from later. Be aware of how close the camera is to the subject. It's a good idea to try several shots from different distances. If you get stuck with one distance for all of your shots, then they'll all end up looking the same. If you vary the distance of your camera to the subject, you'll have a much greater variety to choose from. Don't be afraid to get close to your subject. The closer you get, the closer your viewers can get. Close-up images show detail better than other perspectives. By choosing a camera angle that is unique and shows the subject in an interesting way, we can make our photos visually intriguing for the viewer, as well as make our subject look as good as possible. As we learn about composition, we'll be taking pictures of these flowers and vase. We'll want to show the flowers in the most visually appealing way that we can. One of the easiest things we can do to show the subject in the most interesting way is to take a close-up picture. This will emphasize the detail, color, and the unique qualities of the flower. It's important for us to define a focal point for the photograph. The focal point is the part of the image that we want the viewer to pay the most attention to. It is important to have a well-defined focal point in the image so the viewer understands the message behind the photo. For the photos we're taking today, the flowers should be the focal point. The stem, vase, and background will be supporting subjects, but the emphasis should be on the flowers. As the photographer, it's our job to make the viewer see what we intend them to see. We need to direct the viewer to the important part of the image. When we fill the frame with the flowers, we will immediately define the focal point for our photo because we'll have zoomed in on that one area. Zooming in will automatically eliminate many distracting elements because we literally cut them out of the frame, leaving us with the part of the scene that should have the most emphasis. For many subjects, the details help to tell the story. Showcasing the details can make an image stand out from others. If we zoom in on these details, we will show parts of the subject that may not have been noticed before. This will present the viewer with something new, interesting, and exciting. Many times a scene will be filled with a variety of things in the background that have nothing to do with the subject or the message we're trying to convey. These things in the background are distracting and draw the viewer's eye away from the main subject. Today, our distractions include the tree in the background and the paneling on the wall. As we move closer to the flowers, these background distractions will be lessened or eliminated completely, which will force the focus back onto the flowers. Let's take a few pictures to see the impact that getting closer can have on our image. With photographs of people, close-ups can reveal a lot of personality and expression. Many details can be seen that give the person their individuality. These close-up shots of people can be fascinating. When you're photographing people, try to make sure that the eyes are the focal point of the image. There are places to crop a photograph of a person that feel natural, and there are places that will appear awkward. It generally looks okay to crop the top of a person's head, but looks strange to crop off their chin. If you're not sure about how to properly crop your subject, then take several shots so you can compare them later to decide which one is best. By zooming in on your subject, you will not only eliminate distracting elements in the background, but you will also show details of the subject that will help to make your image much more interesting. A very important compositional element to be aware of is line. There are lines everywhere. Lines can be created by the edges of objects, and they can be within the objects themselves. As you're out taking pictures, look for lines and consider how you can use these lines to direct the viewer's attention to the important parts of the image. Lines can create shape and direction in your image. They can make interesting negative space between objects and can give a photo a rhythm and unity. Lines can imply motion or energy, and they can give the feeling of rest, stability, or power. One of the most important and effective ways to use line is to guide your viewer's eyes to the subject. These types of lines are called leading lines. It's natural for our eyes to follow lines. Think of standing on a railroad track. Your eye naturally follows those tracks until they come to a point. This is the idea behind leading lines. Leading lines can be used as a way to direct the viewer's attention to the important parts of the image. By including subtle lines in a photo that aim toward the focal point, you will help the viewer to stay focused on that part of the image. As we learn more about effective uses of line today, we'll be photographing Lauren. We'll use leading lines to direct the viewer's attention toward her in our images. As we're choosing a location for Lauren to stand for these pictures, we'll want to identify lines that will catch the viewer's attention. When we compose the photo, we'll want to make sure that the lines we've chosen lead the viewer's eye toward Lauren. If the lines lead away from her, it will imply that she is not the focal point, and the viewer will explore other areas of the image. Lines can also lead the viewer right out of the frame if they are placed incorrectly. When you're out taking pictures, you'll want to watch for pointy objects that are placed near the edge of the frame. When a point touches the edge of an image, it's called a tangent and can be very distracting. Tangents will attract the viewer's attention like a magnet and point away from the photograph. When rooftops are placed at the top of a picture, or when pointy elbows are placed at the side, they will create a tangent that will draw attention away from the focal point. Now let's take some pictures of Lauren here in this junkyard, and as we compose the shot, we'll want to remember the rule of thirds and place her in an appropriate intersection. We'll also want to keep the rule of thirds in mind as we consider where to place the lines that we'll be using to direct the viewer's attention to her face. Let's take a few pictures using these palettes behind us to help make the image more interesting. Although the palette is interesting, it actually draws the viewer's eyes away from the frame. When the viewer sees the image, they take a brief glance at Lauren's face, and then their attention is drawn to the palette and out of the frame. So let's recompose the image and take a few more shots. This time, we'll use the lines to our advantage. As you can see, this image is much stronger. The placement of the palette in the frame now leads the viewer's eyes directly to the focal point, Lauren's face, rather than away from it. With all of the lines leading toward her, it will be hard for the viewers to look away. Line can imply different meanings in photography. For example, diagonal lines often imply motion or energy. Placing diagonal lines in an image will make it have an energetic feel, even if the objects in the image are stationary. To make a person appear energetic and active in a photo, simply include some diagonal lines in the composition. Horizontal lines give the impression of peace, rest, or stability. Landscape images are great examples of effective use of horizontal lines. When a viewer looks at a landscape photo, they will often get the impression that the scene has these qualities. Vertical lines give the impression of power, strength, and growth. Common uses of vertical line include images of trees and skyscrapers. The vertical lines created by these subjects can give the viewer the impression that the scene has those qualities. The use of line in composition may be used for aesthetic reasons as well as to invoke a specific meaning to the image. Photography can be a very powerful means to communicate. By utilizing certain compositional elements, you can give your photographs strong messages that the viewer will be able to read very easily. Thanks for watching Quickpro's Composition Essentials DVD. We hope you've enjoyed learning more about using composition in photography. We know this new information will give you enough confidence and know-how to take your photography skills to new levels. If you'd like to learn more about your camera, be sure to check out Quickpro's camera guides for digital SLRs. Visit quickproguides.com to see our full line of instructional DVDs and camera-specific tutorials. Remember to use your composition tips card to help you when you're out taking pictures, and you can review any section of this DVD that is most helpful to you.